Let's go. Here at Table Talk, everybody opinions matter. Cause we only here for one reason, and that's the truth. Cue the truth! So many cases we've been faced, so many kids that have been taken. You got ours and you got on, and some more wells I just can't take. We never see John hesitate. A hard to go you can't replace. So Table Talk gon' be the place where we break down all the basics. You don't need no reservation, open mind, a little face. That's why we work another case. Kids go missing every day. We know the news, they do they thing, but John gon' come through in the pain. But this is a show for all of us, so let us know just what you think. For Table Talk, it's time to go to work. Let the people know that John is going live. It's time for Table Talk. Yeah. It's time for Table Talk. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you Mr. John Q. Y'all show him some love, man.
Let's go to work tonight.
All right. We are here. We are live. We're back with a special Table Talk, part 2 of the Kiely Rodni case, covering the medical examiner's autopsy report. Welcome back, y'all. Good to see you. Who we got in the building? We got, Marlena Cantu is in the building. Much love for you and to you for doing that. Yes, good to see you, Marlena. Carol Smith holding it down in blue. Carol, good to see you. Always good to see you. My goodness, top moderator. One that gets the job done. If you need any information, Carol Smith is the one to get it from. I'm telling you. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Carol, for a special Wednesday night Table Talk. We usually do these on Sundays, but we had to get part 2 of what we did on Sunday back out to you. We spent 2 hours with Dr. AMYSALERNO, a.k.a. Doctora Latina, and we got her back tonight. Yes, we do. Doctor's on a busy schedule, so is John Q. But we make things happen. Miss Lorraine Muhammad is in the house. Peace and blessings to you. Thank you so much for being here. Miss Shamina Wright is in the house. Shamina, welcome, love. Welcome. My goodness. Got Rake's Funny Farm is in the house too. Well, Rake's Funny Farm, thank you for joining us. The room is just building nice and smooth. Everybody's just coming in. No pushing, no running. Absolutely. Miss Robin is in the house, listening from Tippecanoe, Indiana. Be safe. Okay, Miss Robin. I hope I said that right. Me and my name's Tippecanoe. I think I'm getting closer to it. If you stick around long enough, I should have the name down pat at the end of the line. But good to see you, Robin. Opal is in the house. Thank you for joining us. Wow, Miss Leanne Ferguson has stepped in. It's been forever, I know. Good to see you, Leanne. Absolutely. Well, we've got a special live Table Talk tonight. Yes, covering the medical examiner's report in regards to the Kiely Rodni case. We've gone over part 1. Which is a good portion of that part on Sunday. If you missed us on Sunday, please go back to Sunday's live to catch up to what we're about to cover with you here tonight in part 2. Mr. Boss Blake is in the house. All right. Yes. Hope everybody's doing fine. Absolutely. My brother, Mr. Boss Blake, welcome. We've been running shoulder to shoulder behind the scenes covering some other casework. But hey, my brother comes through all the time. Good to see you, bro. Fall breeze is in the house. Well, we do have a fall breeze here in New York. Long-time listener, infrequent commenter. Okay, but good to see you. Good to have you. You know, Miss Justice is booming through the house. Okay, boss. I got you. Miss Justice holding it down in blue. At least I've got Carol Smith and Miss Justice to hold it down for us tonight. You know what kind of live we do? Anytime we do a table talk or cue the truth, we like everything neat, respectful, organized, done with integrity. And thank you, Miss Justice, for dropping Boss's channel up in. If you haven't visited Mr. Boss Blake's channel, oh yes, you got to. You got to. He's got BSM Volume 3. Oh, and I've got matter of fact, I've got a short clip on my channel, and that music is booming. You got to, and it's what 26 pieces on his playlist. You know, some music is for, you know, a general audience, and it is, you know, other music that's, you know, for, you know, specific audiences. But I guarantee you, BSM Volume 1, 2, and 3, it's got a lot for everybody. Everybody. Yeah, I'll probably close the show with one that we had recently enjoyed on another channel, covering another case that's solid. Most certainly. So to get into tonight's table talk, how many of you were with us on Sunday for Sunday night's table talk? Type of 1. You know, many of you are coming back for the second time, and then there are some of you maybe coming in for the first time. Well, we'll try to do what we can to bring you up to speed, but Sunday you don't want to miss. We get into a lot of detail pertaining to the toxicology report. I had a great time with Dr. Latina in covering that information. Okay, we got some ones in here. So Lorraine Muhammad was here. Leanne Ferguson was here. Riggs Funny Farm was here. Mr. Boss Blake was here. Okay, we got some second timers, and that's good. That's good, because tonight the information that we're going to cover is going to get into the written portion of the autopsy. And we're going to be covering some additional information on the analytes, where the toxicology report states that it had screened for 178 analytes. And obviously the cause of death was drowning, manner of death, and accident. How many of you believe this case is an accident or foul play? Let's just take a little bit of a poll to see what people's thoughts are so far. Accident or foul play? And you can just type it in the room. Okay, Miss Justice says no accident. Carol Smith says, I still think foul play. Okay, Shamina Wright, foul play. Wow. Okay. And that's just based on the information that you've collected. And you know, in going through this information, it starts to look funny. I still have a lot of questions about the medical examiner's report. And in addition to that, we're still awaiting information about the CHP report, California Highway Patrol's report, the forensics from the FBI out of Quantico, okay, and of course the official sheriff's report. There's pending information on this case. How they deem it an accident is quite puzzling for me, anyway. And so, taking another deep dive, another careful look at the additional information of the medical examiner's report is most important, because how did the medical examiner determine drowning out of the toxicology and now the autopsy? So tonight we're going to get into the roots of how they came to that conclusion, and bring on a good friend of mine, one that I've enjoyed having a background private chats with, pertaining to, the medical field in which she is fully qualified. She is a doctor of medicine, family medicine, and I'm just going to bring her up and let her introduce herself to you if this is the very first time that you're here. And tonight we have Dr. Latina with us. And your microphone? I know, we get there.
How's that?
And there you go.
Hello. Hi. Oh, my daughter just said hi, Ma.
Oh, wow.
Salerno. Hi, honey. I love you.
Hello, Dorsey is in the house.
Yeah, Dorsey's in the house. She's up in Maine in nursing school.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Good to have her. Wow. And
Well,
that's family support.
That is family support. And I'll tell you, for my new little channel, Dorsey Camila has been, other than John, the key helper to help me get through some of the technology. Yes, so I am Dr. Amy Salerno, as we say, Dr. Amy Salerno, also aka Doctora Latina, and I'm so delighted to come back this evening and lend what sort of support I can to help you sort of shine light on this case, some of the medical terminology, as well as maybe some of my both medical and my personal, since I am a mom, impressions. I'm not making any diagnoses, obviously. I didn't do the autopsy. I don't do autopsies, but I've read hundreds, if not thousands, and tox screens, etc. So I hope that I can share some of my knowledge with your chat family.
Absolutely. And yes, indeed, this is for educational purposes, this information that we're sharing here tonight. We are not, doctor is not here to offer any diagnosis or anything else like that. If there is a situation where medical assistance is needed, please contact your medical service provider for anything necessary that you may be experiencing. Okay. I wanted to share also with you, since I'm up and running on this.
Oh,
Dr. Latina's YouTube channel.
Yes, and I want to talk really quickly. If you, I don't know if that's a picture of it or I don't know all the tech, but Dorsey Camila, who is here, and she goes by Dorsey. I call her Dorsey Camila, or in Spanish we call her Camila. I see Ms. Justice 111 quadruple one says she loves Dorsey and her name. I do too. Dorsey Camila, in her, I think it was first or second year of nursing school, did something called a kindness project, where she handed out to random people, and also I took a bunch of the cards to work with me and handed out to different people at work. I would sort of say, out of the 6 cards, of course we had several hundred cards, pick a card, and they would kind of at random pick the card out, and it would have something positive to say, an affirmation. And so on my shorts, I have published some of the like 30-second blurbs on the reaction, the spontaneous reaction that some of the people that we handed cards to, and how they responded to having been given a kindness card. And first year, Dorsey Camila says. So I just wanted to mention that, because I think it's a really neat concept to be able to be kind to other people. It's so rare these days, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And Dr. Latina has started her channel May 24th of 2020. She has well over 40 9,400 views.
But I did my first video, I think, in May or June of this year with the
Right.
my children. So I'm a newbie. I'm a newbie, guys.
Well, welcome. We need to have more of you and more of the folks that are in the medical field as well as in the legal field, all the professionals, to open up a channel and kind of give us some, educational information when it comes to various different subject events that most people go through in their life from time to time. And so to see that you have had, let's see, you got some videos up here. You've got covering the Summer Wells case. You've covered, let's see, Kim Kardashian, Met Gala 2022. Let's see, AWP. You've got a short here. The Kiely Rodni autopsy, your reflections and comments. Accidental drowning, part 2. And the drowning on the autopsy is a conclusion of exclusion just 8 days ago. Already got 6,500. Wow. Okay. And timing.
I don't know.
14,000 on the second video 2 weeks ago. 22,000 views 2 weeks ago. Okay, doctor.
All right.
I'm in good company.
Party, fiesta. Leanne Ferguson. Yes, it's Doctora Latina. Hi, Leanne.
Absolutely. So I'm in good company. Well, it's good to have everyone joining us for a special table talk tonight covering part 2. Now, in part 1, as I stated, and I'm going to just go ahead and let's see, do a little bit of a highlight here and go back to Prosser Creek Reservoir, where this case started from. Let's see if I can go ahead and share that. This was the area that on August 6th, Kiely Rodni, at a party, lost her life, did not go home at Prosser Lake Reservoir. In the area that I'm showing you here, not very far from the lake itself, the party consisted of about, I would say, roughly 400 to 600 yards, if you will, in this area. There's a road that went south, leaving this area. Now, you could have taken a left and took the road north to leave this park, as you can see here. But here we've got cars leaving. We see a number of them on the fire cam that we're going to show you next that shows cars leaving this area, going south, and then coming back to hit the road to leave. And one of those cars did not follow the circle and go back onto the road. What happened is that we see car lights almost make a pause here at the Y in the road. And this is not smooth road at all. This road, you've got to control your speed and manage to cover that terrain without losing anything on your car. It's got a lot of what appears to be like speed bumps in the road. But right here at the Y, there seemed to have been a 10 to 14 second pause. According to Mr. Gray Hughes, who's done an excellent job in sharing that night vision by putting a daylight overlay on it so that this way we could see this area along with the rest of the park. And that car took a left turn. Rather than follow the main road, it took a left turn and began its way this way and headed toward the embankment here. And right here at the top, where my arrow is, it begins to descend rapidly into the lake. And just about right here is where Kiely's car went into the lake and was found 16 days later by AWP, an independent private dive company. that showed up on August 21st. The car went in on August 6th. The private dive team found the car and remains inside the car, which was later identified via the autopsy as Kiely Rodni, age 16. And so tonight, we're going to be taking a careful look at how this all came about. I'm going to go to the actual video surveillance footage that was taken by the fire cam not very far from this spot and give you a visual. You've probably seen this a dozen times, but I have found that Greg Hughes really did an excellent job. We're not going to go through the entire 13-minute video. We're just going to get it at a portion which gives us the date and the timestamp of 12:22 a.m. on August 6th and show you exactly what that looks like, and then we'll come back. I'm not going to use any sound, or he is playing music on this, so I'm not going to play the music either. But we can make commentary, Doctor, on your visual and the chat's visual.
Yes.
Visual as to what they see. So I'm going to begin playing it now. And as we can see, the lights appear on that road that we just covered. And paying a careful attention of the time and of the scene. And so here we have evidence of cars leaving around that circle dirt road. And this is played in clock time, real time, during the time that this was recorded by the fire cam, not far from the campgrounds.
I think it's important to note that the fire cam is actually not a real-time video. It's done in real time, but the way it works to save memory, so to speak, is it takes picture shots every 2 to 3 seconds, and then it compiles it to make it look like, to make it look like it's a smooth video. But that's why you're kind of seeing this sort of flashy thing, because it's taking every 2 to 3 second clips of a photograph and pasting it together.
Correct. Yep. And as we get down to 12:27, we'll start to see the actual light overlay, giving us a better glimpse of each movement of car lights that appeared on the video. We're at 12:29.
Leanne Ferguson, I've made note of what you've said there in chat, and I'm sure John will go back through the fact that there was another car with headlights right behind Kiely's car. We'll get to that, I think. Right, John?
Yes. There, and Leanne is right. There were 2 cars that went before Kiely's car, and you'll see that car right now, and it goes to the right and begins to travel down the embankment.
Mm-hmm.
You can see right down over here.
Mm-hmm.
Right down over here. $12:32. Now these are the critical moment that we see Kiely's car come down, head toward that same area, toward the embankment. 12:33, 16. 12:33, 40. 12:33, 58. The car is in the water, away from the embankment now. And you can see the actual car lights in the water and then disappear at 12:34, 46. Meanwhile, over here to the left of the screen, there is a vehicle that is down this way. I'll just play a little bit more. And this was what was just so strange. Being it was that dark, and you have a rear view mirror. Why did they stop there? Did they see the car's lights behind them disappear? Oh, sorry about that, folks. Got to deal with these things over here when you're dealing with commercials. They seem so pervasive nowadays. And here are the lights down here, once again to the left,
Just sitting there, right?
just sitting there. And then they start to travel back toward where Kiely's vehicle was. See,
Mm-hmm.
it's one of them in this case. No, there's two of them. They're moving back, both of them.
Mm-hmm.
That gives me two vehicles. One makes a left turn, reconnects with the main road. The other appears to pause. We're getting some reflection now of that car turning around that location. 39, 1239, 1240. And what happened that made this strange is that it comes back and goes right back where it was before.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so here was my main question. I said, wait a minute. On August 21st, when Kiely's car was found, didn't law enforcement ask the national park, did they have cameras? Or even before that, before AWP got there, didn't they ask the national park, did they had cameras? You know what I mean? You know, if an incident happens, would be the first thing that police would ask. Are there any cameras? Anybody see anything? Anybody say anything or whatever? Let's start to, get our information and our ducks in a row. And I said, for this to have shown up after her car was found, it was just a strange thing to say, why didn't law enforcement see this camera footage when they first began the investigation to know where Kiely's car was, and it would not have taken them 16 days to get to her?
Well, may I interrupt?
Yes.
So, one can think of this, maybe it was just what we say in jest, a coinky dink.
Yeah.
Or you could say it was not a coinky dink.
Uh-huh.
The fact that this was, that as best we know, a California fire cam that is a governmental camera system that has lookouts, so to speak, on many, many parks, let's say in this case in California, obviously that is a known entity. And at this point in time when this accident and or non-accident occurred, you had what? You had Placer and Nevada County law enforcement, I believe.
Correct.
Maybe Chip
And
might have
Placer
already
County,
been
too.
involved. And what now?
And Placer County.
Oh yeah, Placer. I don't know. I don't know how you pronounce it. But Spanish. And then you had FBI because there was this worry maybe that there was an abduction. So you have both state and federal authorities. I'm just throwing this out. Do y'all not think that they should have been aware that this camera footage would be present since it's a governmental? What do you all think?
Right. And I said, my goodness. I said, well, I've seen in cases where they start an investigation, that's the first thing they try to obtain is camera footage, video surveillance camera footage from stores or traffic intersections or wherever the incident occurred. you know, and I just found it so strange.
It is odd, and it's troubling.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
And then in the face of, there was as everybody knows, an now infamous interview of a, not a BFF, but maybe a almost BFF in quotes, Sammy, who, when she was interviewed by another content creator, was asked, what about cameras in the area? And, of course, she had her narrative, which were that there's nothing within the park. Of course, this is not within the park, it's from afar. But in Sammy's opinion, really, there was only, she named some intersections locally that there were CCTV type of cameras for traffic. But
right, I remember that.
There's nothing mentioned, and maybe she was unaware of this, but in that now infamous interview, I'm sure law enforcement would have seen that and would have, if they didn't remember that there was this California fire cam always going 24/7, and the archives can be looked back at, maybe that interview you would have assumed might have tickled their little memory and said, oh, we do have that fire cam, we need to look at that.
Right.
But that didn't come out really until 15 days prior to the now mysteriously defunct, never happened, November 1st presser.
Oh, which was yesterday.
I don't believe, the day after Halloween. It was what we say in Spanish that it was un fantasma, which means a ghost. So it was a ghost presser. I mean, I don't think they had a presser. I don't know. I believe it was un fantasma.
And for those that would like to review this camera footage on Gray Hughes channel, I've got it posted in the description box on Gray Hughes' channel. I think he did an absolutely excellent job in really putting that brighter overlay, a daylight overlay, to really brighten this up to give us a better visual on how Kiely's car ended up going into the lake at that time. So right now, I'm just going to take this down. I want to welcome everyone to tonight's special table talk with Doctora Latina to cover the remaining portion of the autopsy, the medical examiner's report. We've covered toxicology on Sunday. We're going to get into the autopsy portion of that report tonight. Okay, so let's go ahead and get that attached. Let's see if this is it. I've got to show it. I'm going to show it here. Got to go back to entire screen.
Oh, Mom First Always, John. I'm sorry to kind of go back off what you're about to do, but that's really interesting. Mom First Always at 9:06 p.m. just now had a question for me, and I had that's a fascinating question. Do you want to look at that, or?
Let's see. Is this the question?
Yes.
Okay, question for Dr. Salerno.
Salerno, like
Salerno.
air. We always say Salerno, like air that you breathe. Air, Salerno. Okay, go ahead.
Salerno.
Oh, perfetto. Okay.
All right, so we had Kiely had like no water in her lungs and other sacs, nose, and ears.
I'm not sure what she means by other sacs, but okay.
Other sacs, nose, and ears.
Okay.
Every time I think about this, I ask myself, could Kiely have had a plastic bag over her head? Kept it from us?
Very. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's fascinating. And that is really interesting that you asked that. I mean, honestly had never, of course we're speculating, but it is interesting, so then the question would beg, was she deceased and then dumped, right, in the water, versus was she drowned and then died?
Right.
And That's an outstanding question. That is an interesting thing. And because if somebody was suffocated like that, that's really, I'm just like tickled in a way, not really, but tickled that you asked that, because the last time, and what people have focused on, myself included, is that the autopsy said no to strangulation. There was no ligation, ligature marks. There were no bruising. There was no like fingerprint bruising around the trachea. The trachea was not compromised. It wasn't crushed. There was no evidence of hanging, so to speak, by the intact hyoid bone. And then, but nobody has asked this question. And I'm just so tickled, because it's always good to see other people thinking, because that's how people were saying, well, she couldn't have been deceased, let's say, from suffocation, because there are none of these strangulation type of things. But then Mom First Always points out, she could indeed have been suffocated if she'd had a plastic bag put over her head and was deceased. Other people I've recently seen on other chats have said maybe that she was chloroformed and then suffocated. So those are really, really good questions, especially in light of the fact that, a lot of the autopsy findings are inconsistent one with the other. Inconsistent, for instance, we'll get to later, the tattoo location with respect to where it was published, or her tattoo supposedly would have been. So it leads to less confidence by the public, myself included, as to how thorough and or how maybe sloppy the documentation was. And that's why maybe Mom of One is saying, or Mom First Always is saying, maybe they didn't share that piece, that there could have been a bag over the head.
Right.
So sorry.
That is a great question. Great question. I'm glad you asked that. Miss Jamina Wright, didn't someone find her computer and other items at the bottom of the ravine, and the police didn't want to come and get it? I mean, was that true? And according to what I was able to find, that a YouTuber went out there and went to the same location that the car went into the water. And lo and behold, he started finding items that were in Kiely's car, her computer.
Items that actually had been documented by AWP, right, on their video. Items right?
Right. I believe that they did. I'd have to double check their site to see if there's anything complimentary to that particular finding.
I believe so.
For the police to find the car, her in it, upside down, and managed to turn this automobile over underwater. Now, there was a broken window on the passenger side, and on the driver's back window was halfway down. So you got water coming in two different directions, and that's why we saw the vehicle just submerge within seconds of it entering the water. And so, yes, not to secure that passenger side broken window and or the back driver's side window that was halfway down, items came out of the car. Hence another question. Why didn't law enforcement have the divers go back into the water to recheck that area where the vehicle was in regards to any additional evidence that they may have needed? Why was it a YouTuber later on, after the car was found and taken and towed and taken into FBI custody for forensics, didn't they go back into the water to check for further evidence? Now, this YouTuber that found that evidence had a hard time contacting law enforcement officials at the sheriff's department to state that he's found these items. He made several videos on that, and they seem not to return his phone calls. And I just found that really strange.
Yeah, I think that there's so many. I'm reading the chat. That's why my eyes are down, guys. I'm supposed to be looking at the light here, but I'm reading so I can engage myself in the chat and the photos and what John is saying. But one of the final things that was sort of, let's say, talked about was that, well, they didn't really need these items anymore. Let's say that they didn't need the laptop for whatever reason. They had all the information that they needed, I guess, from her phone, which I don't even know if they ever found the phone. But to me, especially as forgetting crime scene chain of custody, forgetting keeping the crime and or investigative scene pristine, let's say they didn't need any of those items. These are the last items that belonged to Kiely,
Right.
who had a mommy and a daddy. These are the last things that she touched, the last items that they would likely want to hold and remember her with, right?
Absolutely.
And to me, as a parent, the sort of cavalier way that scene was left and not, like you said, John, gone back to by law enforcement divers to retrieve anything, regardless of whether they needed it for evidence purposes, to me, it shows a total lack of respect for the deceased and her family.
Yes. Yes, indeed. And more so a lack of competency in doing their job properly at a crime scene. And when you have a situation like that, it reminds me of the Kanika Jenkins case, where law enforcement officials did not take DNA, did not do fingerprints, did not scrub under the nails, did not collect a number of different items that were there in and around her body to process for any kind of DNA transfer, hair samples, transfer itself from one individual to another, anything on the door, in and around the area that she was found in the freezer. It just led more and more questions. What are these guys doing? Had they already made the determination, in which in that case they did, called it an accident rather than a homicide, and
or even undetermined.
Yeah, and failed to do their job properly to come to a firm conclusion that it was an accident and or a homicide, but it was deemed accidental death. And the cause of death was hypothermia, because she was found in a freezer. Whether it was on or not, we don't know.
Wait, are we talking about Kanika?
Kanika. Yeah. And for the autopsy pathological findings to say that, hypothermia was the cause of death, with contributing factors of topiramate and ethanol in her systems. Boom, that was it. And that's how they wrote it up. But never took her body temperature upon receiving her at the medical examiner's office to determine how cold or cool her body was upon reception.
Well, as you and I discussed a couple of days ago with the Kanika case, and one of the first things a coroner, deputy coroner at a scene proper, whether we'll just call it a crime scene or scene, they're supposed to carry with them a portable little thermometer and just take either a forehead, or you could even put it in this person's ear canal. So when Kanika was found, I know we've jumped back to Kanika, but this is another example. They didn't take a temperature until they should have taken a temperature, because it would have shown, she wasn't hypothermic. Actually, maybe the fridge wasn't on, or maybe she had just been put in the fridge or the freezer and she was still 98 degrees when they found. I mean, we don't know, but there's no point of reference. So then for them to take Kenneka's temperature after she's been in the morgue or in the fridge or freezer with law enforcement location, it's not meaningful. You can't say hypothermia because you haven't taken Kenneka's temperature at the point where she was discovered.
Right, exactly. And I would figure that the coroner that showed up a little after 3 a.m. that morning, they had found her at 12:24 in the freezer. He shows up at a little after 3:06 a.m. in the morning. That would be one of his first duties. Mm-hmm. If you find someone in a freezer, was it on? Was it off? Okay. Let's do preliminary investigation. Let's start to do those things that I talked about. Work the DNA, scrub under the fingernails. If there was an altercation of some kind, there would be skin residue of some kind there. Fingerprints on the door, items that were found in the freezer, etc., etc. For the coroner to even think about doing that, checking her temperature and recording it right then and there, and not wait for the transfer, which happened at 5:10, to go to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy 10 a.m., 6 hours later that morning. So in this case, for Kiely Rodni, they didn't even get to do or perform the autopsy on the 21st when she was found. They did it on the 23rd, 2 days later. And we're going to be getting into that right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I can understand that there may have been a delay of 2 days, but there were fumbles, in my opinion, from the point, well, way before the point of having pulled her out, right? With them probably not diving. I mean, that's what the sheriff said. There was no dive team proper that actually went into Prosser Lake from their agency. But, just the coroner, as somebody, I wrote this down about 10 minutes ago, mentioned, let me see if I can see who said this, Rake's Funny Farm said, well, how about the strap that was mentioned? And I think what Rakes is talking about in Kiely's situation is that there was that strap that was found outside the tailgate. And yet when the deputy sheriff coroner, in Kiely's case, first laid eyes from his report, the way he writes it is that the car was already flipped over, already on the shore, and that the tailgate was already open. And he describes her position, less strap. He doesn't even, once a tailgate would have been opened, there's very likely that the strap would have just flipped back up to the ceiling. And so
right.
We don't know what her real position was then. Yeah.
Right. And great Bo Evans, if stomach gas pushed the water out of her after that, wouldn't water find its way back into her body?
Okay. If stomach.
Interesting. Thank you, Bo.
If stomach gas pushed the water, because they said there was gas. Is that what he's saying? Because I think the gas they were talking about was probably more the gases associated with decomposition. After that, wouldn't water have found its way back into her body? Depends, I think, on the pressure, whether there was enough. If indeed, Bo, you have stomach gas, and then there's water gets pushed out, and it leaves a vacuum of pressure.
Right.
Depends on then yes, water would have come back in, but these are difficult.
Very interesting perception right there. So what I'm going to do is let's get into the autopsy. I'm going to pull it up, and I'll tell you, we got the sharp ones in the chat tonight. I'm telling you. All right. So I'll pull this back up to the portion of the autopsy. We left off on this page on Sunday, where the undersigned, having made an examination, find the cause of death to be drowning. Okay. We have 16-year-old female Kiely Rodni, blonde hair, 66 inches in height, 103 pounds. Drowning, that's it. The specimens that were taken for toxicology was just liver specimens.
Right.
And
That's
stock tissue.
well, the stock tissue. I'm sorry, just to clarify. So it was for specimens were taken for stocks. Check.
Yes.
Oh, and then there was stock tissue which they've held on to for a year, right? And of that stock tissue, they had an opportunity potentially to take 10 different things or more, and they just took the liver. That's it.
Right. No blood, no urine, no vitreous, gastric, bile, no muscle, lungs, spleen, kidney, brain.
Now, what I also find a little, can you just stop right there and maybe blow that up a little bit? Because somebody pointed this out, and now I see it now that I'm looking.
This portion here?
Okay. Yes, John.
Sure.
I want folks to notice. Go now. Can you go up a wee bit, down a wee bit? What? I don't know. Go.
Is that too big?
No, it's perfect. Go to brain, guys. Go, but keep the check there. Go up brain. What do you see there?
Yeah. Let me blow it up again.
What does everybody see?
Let me blow it up again.
Brain. What are you doing? He's drawing.
No. I'm trying to move it.
I know.
Yeah, I'm drawing at the wrong time, right?
Look at that, guys. Does anybody see what I see in the box?
Ooh.
What that is, and it is obviously to me that somebody has whited out a check mark about brain tissue, either because they didn't want to have it on the report or it was an error. But I need to tell you that as a physician, when we make an error, which happens, it is medical legally unacceptable to white anything out on a medical document. The best practices, the only practices, would be to put one line through that box and then on the margin say error, and then you put underneath it, in my case I put ARS, which are my initials, and I circle it, and I'll put a date to say when I did the correction. So this pixelated thing there is troubling to me because it is absolutely unacceptable. And I know I'm probably going to receive heat for saying that, but it doesn't matter because I'm speaking as a physician for 30 years. This is unacceptable. It's okay to make a mistake. That we're not perfect people, but when you make a correction, it has to be one line through, error, so that people know that there really wasn't brain that was collected. Let's say in this case, error, and then your initials underneath it, and then the date that you noticed and made that correction. That's very important finding to me.
Yes, indeed. Great finding. Absolutely great finding.
I know on another channel, I'll not name names, but on another channel that was found a month ago. I didn't know where they said something. I didn't even know it was this brain thing, but it was it must be what they were saying, commenting, oh, it was just whited out. It's no big deal. No, it is a big deal. It may not be a big deal from like a law enforcement perspective, but this is a medical document signed by a physician. So I'm speaking as a physician what best practices are.
And this was signed off by Dr. Gregory D. Reiber, MD, forensic pathologist. So now getting into the body of the autopsy report.
Oh, yes, it is what it is. You're right.
It is what it is. Okay. Was there anything, doctor, on the actual written autopsy report you wanted to go over in reference to any specific findings that you felt important?
Okay, well, I just wanted to, we're not going to read everything about the clothing, but
right.
What I think is most remarkable about, I think it starts at line, I forget, 12 or something. I don't quite remember. So maybe let's say line 16. Now we go to 21 under clothing. Line 21, you go all the way down to line whatever it is, 40 something, I don't recall.
Okay.
42. That is the longest and most detailed autopsy description in my 30 years of reading autopsies I've ever seen with regards to a person's jewelry. And to me, it is more, all of that detail is far more detailed than the detail, physical or lack thereof, findings for drowning. I find that remarkable. And the only way my mind can understand why would they spend so much time saying there's a discolored yellow metal ring in the left middle finger, heavy, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's so almost over the top descriptive in comparison to the actual autopsy where we're looking for findings of drowning, is that maybe they were trying to use that for presumptive identification purposes, since they didn't have, or they didn't do fingerprinting. There was apparently no dental records available, and they didn't do any DNA from what we could figure out from the documentation. So but I find that troubling.
Right. And evidence from medical intervention, none. The external examination showed moderate decomposition. There was mild bloating of the body and the general discoloration of the exposed dermis, ranging from pale gray, dash green to dark maroon. There's no remaining rigor mortis and no lividity pattern discernible. A strong odor of decomposition surrounds the remain. No postmortem insect activity present. Now,
let's go to the teeth.
Yeah, the teeth are natural and in good condition. There is discoloration of the crowns of the teeth, which have a pale pink stain from decomposition.
Right. So that actually, the pale pink stain is actually not from decomposition. It's really considered a lividity or blood positioning. That is a lividity finding. So actually there was lividity finding.
Okay. A small amount of purge fluid is collected in the mouth.
Mm-hmm. Fluid.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next.
Yeah, my question on that, and I think you highlighted this, but I don't know if I mentioned this to you. We'll find that in the gastric contents there was no fluid, but there were legumes and pea particulate matter from a previous meal. So I wonder how they decided that was purge fluid when it doesn't say that there were peas or any particulate matter of food. So, and when they go to talk about the gastric contents, there was no fluid. So it's inconsistent. It's discrepant. There's a discrepancy to me.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Or maybe I'm not.
No, it makes sense. Makes sense. Absolutely. Let's see what else. Discoloration, decomposition is otherwise unremarkable. Upper and lower extremities are symmetrical and normally developed and show no apparent external trauma. Scars and identifying marks. But did you want to make a comment on that?
No, I don't know if I'm allowed to do this. I'm interrupting you. But I'm just reading what Leanne just said. The teeth should not be pale pink. But in a submerged individual who is deceased, there is a bright or pale pink staining of the crowns or the top of the teeth and even the gums, which in recent years in the scholarly literature, it shows it's not related to the fact that the person was alive and drowned. It's related to the fact that a deceased person, whether they were dumped or they dumped, or whether they drowned and they were alive going in and drowned, that pink coloration is a lividity pattern or pooling of blood. And it's positional, depending like the head down, and you get that lividity pattern. And it's a chemical reaction. in the gum area and on the crowns of the teeth. And it is classic of a submerged deceased person to have that coloration.
Interesting. So we come down to scars and identifying marks. A small stippled tattoo of the number 17 is on the lateral right hip. There is a vaguely defined longitudinal linear surgical scar on the ventral left wrist. Postmortem radiographic scan demonstrates an orthopedic plate and multiple screws in the distal left radius. So this number 17 on the lateral right hip, wasn't it also stated that the number 17 was also on her wrist somewhere or elsewhere on her body?
Well, I think it was, as I recall, there are a bunch of mainstream media articles that prior to her having been found that talked about different physical findings that were important to look for if she was missing or whatever. And it said that the number 17 was on her ribs area.
Okay.
But there was also, guys, I saw recently, I'll see if I can do it here, a stippled, usually stippled means like the way the tattoo is done is like a homemade tattoo, or even like a jail tattoo is stippled because it's not a professional tattoo. But there is a photograph of Kiely with a little tiny 17 and I think a little heart or something on this portion of one of her hands that was in the news prior to her having been found. So the whole 16 days prior, my understanding from the articles I read and social media, etc., was that one should be looking for the number 17 at the very least on her ribs. I mean, that was published in, these are not, scholarly articles. These are more like somewhat tabloidish, but people.com, sun.com, Radar Online, heavy.com, Fox 11 LA, they all talked prior to her having been found about the number 17 tattoo on her ribs, not on her hip. So what's that about?
Yes, right. So according to the doctor who performed the autopsy, he's only got it on the right hip. So maybe it was, the most significant that he had found, that he made a record of. Why didn't he make a record of the rest if the number 17 showed up elsewhere? You kind of figure.
What's ironic is nobody, family or friends, ever mentioned a 17 on her hip. They only mentioned it on her ribs. That was never corrected. That's odd to me. And the 17, from what I understand, this is just hearsay, is that there's a band with the 17 or some sort of rock band that has
rock band. Okay. It had to be a significance of the 17 somewhere,
Yeah.
External evidence of injury. There was no apparent blunt or penetrating injuries seen externally. Postmortem radiographic scan of the whole body also demonstrates no evidence of acute skeletal trauma.
And that's important because that would rule out, for instance, like a knife wound, blunt trauma, or head trauma, or a firearm that, that kind of thing.
Or a subdural hematoma, etc. Okay.
Although subdurals would more likely be seen on CAT scan, which they did not do, actually.
Now that's interesting. Okay. Internal evidence of injury, none. One word, period. So odd to see that just standing by itself with a period at the end. Okay. Internal examination, opening of the incision and body cavities. Okay. So we'll pretty much, that's a procedure that's done to begin looking into the body here, neck and organs. shows discoloration from decomposition and marks softening. There's no apparent strap muscle hemorrhages.
You
The
see,
high- Yes, go ahead.
you can see strap. The strap muscles are these two muscles. We call them strap muscles. You can see hemorrhaging into the muscle area if there were compression externally from either a strangulation or a choke, somebody who's compressed externally. So that's to point away from having been killed or murdered or whatever from an external force. But interesting, we'll go back to that. I think it was Mom First, mentioned the thing with the plastic bag, that a person could still have had a plastic bag over their head, or even taped or whatever, and still suffocate before having been put in the water, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you wouldn't see those markings, soft tissue markings.
Right. Interesting. The hyoid bone and laryngeal cartilages show no fractures.
For people who hang themselves, about 25% of the time, the hyoid bone, which is right near the voice box, does fracture. Only 25%. It's called a hangman's fracture, but not all people would have that. And the laryngeal cartilages show no fractures because in hanging, most of the people that hang themselves, the ligature is either at the voice box portion of the larynx or a little bit above, and there's no trauma there. So I'm just trying to explain why they would make comments in that way.
Okay.
So in other words, no evidence of external compression with somebody else's hands, etc., or hanging.
Right. The cervical spine is grossly intact, so they didn't find anything wrong there. But predominantly from the cardiovascular system, heart weighing 90 grams appears normally formed. Everything else is intact, and the aorta is patent, follows a normal course, and shows light orange discoloration from decomposition. We get into the respiratory system. Now we get into the heartbeat area of water, whether they were found in the lungs at this point. The right lung weighs 100 grams, and the left lung weighs 110, and that would total 210 in terms of the weight involved.
Mm-hmm.
The larynx, trachea, and bronchial are patent and normally formed, is what we found.
Right, or they found.
Excuse me.
So
other than that, there is no apparent airway obstruction.
So no food, no regurgitation from the stomach, no obstruction from having inhaled water from a surrounding pond or fresh water, no frothy pink foam, which is about 60% of drowning victims would be below the voice box. We've mentioned that, but there's no evidence of any of that. They're patent, it's open, normally formed, and there's no commentary vis-a-vis regurgitation of gastric contents, evidence of surrounding water that was aspirated with resultant silt or dirt, etc. They also here don't comment about any microscopic, i.e. taking portions of the distant aspect of the laryngobronchial trees called the alveoli, where they can actually take little samples and stain the alveoli, which are very small look like little buds on a tree. And those are the air pockets, which one can see under microscope, whether they're open or closed. If they're open, or if they contained microscopic bacteria that might be related to having aspirated when alive, but prior to drowning, or silt, or any of that. But there's no comment on that.
Right.
So we don't know.
So for most folks who have been able to, get a copy of this autopsy and start reading, they're looking for water. They're looking for this thing related to drowning in the respiratory system and in other areas. But this is just a short 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 line paragraph that basically indicates there's no water in the lungs. She did not take in through her mouth or through her nose in any way, shape, or form that would lead us to believe that, the water would go down into the lung area, and because it's not specified here.
Or regurgitate, right? Or
regurgitate, right.
Gastric contents, right? Because then they might have commented, well, there were little peas, pea particles or whatever, or legumes that she aspirated from her gastric contents, but there's no comment, no airway obstruction. Okay.
Right. Gastrointestinal system, the esophagus and stomach are patent, continuous, and normally developed. No focal lesions are evident. Stomach contains a trace amount of particulate food material consistent with small fragments of peas or beans. Everything else shows the items here. Duodenum, the duodenum. I'm getting used to these tongue-twisting words. Duodenum, small intestines, appendix, and colon show discoloration, softening, and focal gas bloating from decomposition, and are otherwise unremarkable.
So everything else is normal here.
Yeah, that's what it appears to be. Short, brief paragraphs explaining all this normalcy of these systems. Endocrine system, thyroid is severely decomposed and is difficult to identify. The adrenals are markedly softened from decomp. There's decomp here, and much of the architecture is lost. The pituitary is severely softened from decomposition. So the endocrine system has been compromised by decomposition in this particular area. Skeletal system, no injuries found. Everything here is okay. Head. Reflections of the scalp reveal light maroon staining. The deep scalp tissues predominantly on the right side. Probably the side that she was on. Consistent with the lividity under the effects of decomposition. The skull is intact and normal in thickness. No evidence of epidural or subdural hemorrhage.
So in other words, like you can get a subdural hemorrhage or an epidural hemorrhage. Let's pretend you're in a high rate of speed auto accident and you were unrestrained, and there was no unrestrained meaning no seatbelt, and there was no airbag deployment, and you hit your head hard against something like the steering wheel or the windshield. You get head trauma. You can get bleeding inside the brain. Well, there was no evidence of any of that.
Right. And hence, therefore, it could possibly produce a subdural hematoma.
Now, this is look at line 191. Materials for histology, which is histology to look at tissue under the microscope. What did they say they took for stock tissue?
We don't know.
Well, it says major organs, right here.
Oh, sections of major organs.
Cut and paste.
Are saved as stock tissue.
Right. They didn't. Organs, plural. Apparently, according to what they checked off, and then what they whited out, they only took the liver. But there were no other major organs were taken. No skin, no, kidney, spleen, etc. So there is a discrepancy there as well.
Postmortem photographs taken by Dr. Raber and Detective Walker. Postmortem x-rays, AP, Lodox scan. We've got evidence collected, head hair, pubic brushings, oral and rectal swabs, smears, cervical, vag, and introital swabs and smears, and a DNA card.
So here they say DNA card. That's
Mm.
important. Later they say that no DNA, as I recall, right? Do you remember that on that supplement? It said there was no DNA collected.
Right, in the supplement, correct. Autopsy assistants: Destiny Moffat, Brittany Brand, and Chrissy Myers. Witnesses at the autopsy: Detective Strachan, Detective Walker, Nevada Sheriff's Department McCain, and Michelle Ramirez, FBI Luis Montez de Oca, Truckee area CHP. And hence we come to the very bottom of the autopsy and the conclusion of the autopsy in the findings 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1. Decedent found in submerged vehicle which was recovered from an inverted position in the lake. A. Postmortem changes consistent with prolonged water submersion. B. Moderate postmortem decomposition. 2. No external or internal evidence of significant injury. 3. Postmortem toxicology on liver tissue positive for ethanol, possibly all or part from decomposition, nicotine and cotinine, caffeine, and delta-9 carboxy THC. See NMS Labs report. We covered that in Sunday's Table Talk. Number 4, radiographic scan shows orthopedic hardware, 2-column volar plate from open repair at distal left radius. And finally, the cause of death, drowning. Now, if we went back here under the postmortem toxicology on liver tissue positive for ethanol, I just want to close on this note where we covered positive findings of ethanol, nicotine, caffeine, cotinine, and delta-9 carboxy THC. We come down to the detailed findings in its entirety. Now, the ethanol here is present at 88 at 100 grams. The reporting limits of 80. Specimen source 002, liver tissue. Now, the nicotine, caffeine, and cotinine and, well, let's just do these three. Nicotine, caffeine, and cotinine, presumptive positive, presumptive positive, presumptive positive. But unconfirmed screen confirmation by a more definitive technique such as GCMS is recommended. As you can see here, in the terms and the amounts, there are no amounts in nicotine, no amounts in caffeine, no amounts in cotinine, no amounts in delta-9 carboxy THC either. The only thing that has been confirmed out of the detailed findings is the ethanol, which has been confirmed with the amount registered here and taken from the liver tissue. But the code of 002 once again tells us, due to the nature of this specimen, and that's for every single one of them, each specimen, some analytes may not be detected by GCMS qualitative analysis. And I said, okay, so if they tested for 178, how many did they truly get out of this to determine what analytes were present and which ones weren't? Was my question.
And we don't know. That's the bottom line.
We don't know.
They don't say we tested for instance, for fentanyl. There, by the way, 14 different synthetic types of fentanyl.
Right.
But this test, this expanded test, postmortem tissue, does test for fentanyl, plain old fentanyl.
Right. And there's a very specific fentanyl that Doctora Latina wanted to bring to everyone's attention, and it is this car fentanyl.
Right.
Which is, when she brought it to my attention, I said, "They got another fentanyl? Uh-oh."
Right.
Well,
this
one's more lethal, though.
Yep. It's more lethal, and it is, it would be really great if you could link it at the end for folks to see this DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, little officer safety alert. But carfentanil is one of the fentanyls, and the fentanyl is a synthetic, meaning manufactured opioid. But it is 10,000 times more potent than morphine, than morphine, heroin. And it is 100 times more potent than regular old fentanyl. This tox screen that they tested, that they used in the lab, the NMS lab, and I think everybody can go look themselves if they want to see what all was tested for. But fentanyl was tested for, but carfentanil was not tested for Kiely. And that's huge that was not tested for, because it is 100 times more potent and lethal, really, than fentanyl. And it is epidemic in the United States, not just in the Truckee area, but all over. So much to the point, guys, that now there is what they call a portable drug test that law enforcement can carry on them, and even kids going to concerts, they can actually, they're $1 a piece, these tests. So before kids even take a drug now, they can actually test to see if carfentanil is on board in the drug. Sad to say, but it's really important to know that this carfentanil is considered one of the big subtypes of fentanyl out there. And this handout that I gave to John really talks about what are the signs and symptoms of having been exposed, because sometimes law enforcement or even folks out in the lay folks out in the field can be exposed. There was an exposure of a 13-year-old in the middle school near where I live a couple of months ago, and he got a hold of some fentanyl inadvertently. Well, he purposefully opened the tiny little Ziploc bag, but then he just was breathing, and he inhaled a small portion as just microscopically, and he was found dead in the boys' middle school bathroom. And it is so potent that when they found him dead and they saw what was next to him, they actually had to get the entire school had to be evacuated, and they had to bring everybody that came into the school to evaluate had hazmat suits on, had to go through a whole shower process coming out of the school, and the whole entire school had to be closed for several days so they could do like a decontamination because of the fentanyl. The small amount. Well, this boy had brought quite a number of little bags in with him, but we're going to show you a graphic of what amount of fentanyl, and this is an example for the carfentanil, that can kill a person. And it's frightening.
Definitely. Let me just drop this down for a second and show you.
And it is scary. It is really scary because it's, there you go. You want to say what this is? There's a penny.
Yeah, that is a penny. I just wanted to take down that comment from blocking the rest of it.
Okay.
Now, you know the size of a penny. Everyone knows the size of a penny. But take a look to the right of it. And it's that amount, 2 milligrams of powder next to that penny. 2 milligrams.
Of carfentanil. This is an example of carfentanil.
Carfentanil is lethal.
And look how big it is.
Incredible.
It is incredible because just as an aside, recently, one of my children who's working full time, somebody that was working and was dismissed, obviously, left a powdery substance in a dime bag on the counter. And I freaked out. I was like, oh my God, what did you do? It was really scary. And thank God my daughter said I didn't go near it. I donned gloves. I held my breath before I went near it. I got it. I removed it and put it within the confines of the glove. We disposed of it. Then we washed our hands. We disinfected everything around us. I mean, but this is the kind of stuff that people are, you don't know if you're sitting somewhere or whatever. It is really scary. What's also really scary is that, in my opinion, it should have been, carfentanil should have been tested for it. If it wasn't, then I don't believe that we can really rule out that especially that Truckee has this fentanyl problem. How do we know that there wasn't an overdose, with the carfentanil? We don't.
Right. Rick's Funny Farm said that it's bad there in West Virginia.
Is it, Rick?
Yep. And so, looking at this bullet point here, exercise extreme caution. Be aware of any signs of exposure. Symptoms include respiratory depression or arrest, drowsiness, disorientation, sedation, pinpoint pupils, and clammy skin. The onset of these symptoms usually occurs within minutes of exposure. Seek immediate, all cap, medical attention. Carfentanil and other fentanyl-related substances can work very quickly. So in cases of suspected exposure, it is important to call EMS immediately. If inhaled, move the victim to fresh air. If ingested and the victim is conscious, wash out the victim's eyes and mouth with cool water.
Right. And that's because fentanyl is so very potent that it is absorbed on the mucous membranes. And even if you're not intentionally swallowing a pill, it's absorbed. So that's why when we give mouth to mouth, if we give mouth to mouth in the field, you really should have a barrier, one of those one-way air masks, because what if somebody has ingested fentanyl and there's some residue and you're giving mouth to mouth? Well, there you go. The eyes. And there have been cases of there's a veterinarian. I was reading a veterinarian because the carfentanil is actually like a horse tranquilizer. It's used to tranquilize horses, right? But apparently he inadvertently got just a small amount that was aerosolized or put into the air from the drug that he was giving to the animal, and it got onto the mucous membranes of his eye, conjunctiva, and he collapsed and he almost died.
Wow.
So this is really serious. I know my daughter, who's a nursing student at 955, I don't know if you can see that, Dorsey Salerno asked you a question, John.
Oh, okay. Wouldn't they want to test for all types of synthetic fentanyl? Yeah, I would think so. I mean, you're a forensic, and there are three types of autopsies. One is a regular autopsy, one is a forensic autopsy, and the third is a virtual autopsy. And doctor, if you could take maybe a few seconds to explain the
virtual
between the three, if the regular autopsy would cover.
Regular autopsy is similar to a forensic, except that it is conducted by a pathologist who, number one, who is not, fellowshipped in the subspecialty of forensic pathologist. Number two, the forensic autopsy goes into further deeper detail with respect to the physical exam and should include information gathered from a coroner vis-a-vis the crime scene or the scene, and that needs to go in part and parcel with the story of what happened to this person. And number three is the virtual autopsy, which is becoming more and more commonplace, and it is considered an adjunct or a not to replace, but just an additional type of autopsy to a forensic autopsy. And it's a special imaging CAT scan, but it's not a regular CAT scan. It's done at a different imaging levels. And it is a CAT scan of your entire body. And it looks at specific areas to rule out, for instance, in drowning, you cannot see air fluid levels of the sphenoid sinus that happen when people aspirate and it goes back into your sinuses, and specifically the sphenoid sinus, that yellow right back there. It's way posterior behind the nose area. In drowning, you can't tell on a regular autopsy, but if a virtual autopsy, which means that special CAT scan is done with attention to the sinuses, one will see air fluid levels. Air, of course, you have air normally in all of your sinuses as a way to protect your face in case of trauma. It's a buffer, kind of insulates us from damage, right, into the face and the brain. But you'll see a level of a darker, let's say, or lighter, depending on the CAT scan, level of fluid versus darker, which is the air. So you'll see an air fluid level in drowning, and fully between 68 and 70+% of drowning victims will have, on a virtual CAT scan, post-mortem autopsy, virtual autopsy, they will have air fluid levels. So if you find those air fluid levels, it will give you great ammunition, so to speak, or value to point towards drowning as the cause of the death. But in this case, that was not done. So we don't have a virtual autopsy. And interestingly, I mentioned this last time, in some areas of the world, I believe it's in Australia and Japan, a virtual autopsy, which is the CAT scan adjunct to a forensic autopsy, it's required by their law of their nation prior to cremation. A person has to have a virtual autopsy to gather as much extra adjunct information about any pathologic findings pointing towards different causes of death, i.e., in the case that I just spoke about, air fluid levels in the sphenoid sinus. And they require that by law prior to cremation, obviously, because once you've cremated, you can't get that information anymore. So in this case, the CAT scan postmortem, i.e. the virtual CAT scan, was not done. So there's a whole bunch of potential information that we will not be able to glean, and that was not gleaned because it was not done.
Now, this naloxone, yeah, be ready to administer naloxone in the event of exposure. Naloxone is an antidote for opioid overdose. And we have immediately administering naloxone can reverse an overdose of carfentanil, fentanyl, or other opioids, although multiple doses of naloxone may be required. Continue to administer a dose of naloxone every 2 to 3 minutes until the individual is breathing on his or her own for at least 15 minutes, or until EMS arrives. That's how lethal this stuff is.
It is. And where my daughters and I were living in Western Jersey, there is truly an epicenter, let's say, of heroin and fentanyl problem. And in the clinic, we had naloxone available because we had so many patients that had a problem. A lot of patients had a problem with heroin and fentanyl in case somebody came in symptomatic. But what was really sort of frightening to me is that in the 7-Elevens and the Wawas, and even in a place I went, a taqueria, to get some tacos one time, young people were found. I'm giving examples of 3 that I recall, found deceased with a needle in their arm. So it's heroin, in the bathrooms, in the convenience store bathroom, in the little restaurant bathroom. It is really scary. And of course, it's too late to give them naloxone at that point. But naloxone, I know in New York City, there is I believe between the New York City Health Department and I believe it's Walgreens Pharmacy, there is a relationship where folks can actually get through the Health Department of New York City at Walgreens. They can get free naloxone. They come in these small little sort of, you breathe them in, inhalation things to carry on them in case they themselves feel an overdose coming on, or they come across a friend that's having an overdose, that kind of thing. And it's really important. That's part of what we wanted to talk about tonight, just to make people aware of the fentanyl crisis, the opioid crisis, carfentanil, signs and symptoms, and the importance of naloxone. And I guess I would really challenge folks to download that link that you're going to put up, and also find out in your local area what is the availability of naloxone. And, should folks be carrying it with them in case they come across somebody, or in case their child, has a problem, or I had a lot of patients in their 30s, 40s, and 50s that had opioid, including pills, prescription pill problem, and overdosing.
Shamina Wright, in an investigation, how do you know what you don't need if you don't have the items to rule it out? Yeah, that's a great question.
Miss Shamina has made so many good points tonight. I'm watching everything that folks are writing. Leanne, I've been watching everything, and it really is remarkable how much seems not to have been looked at here, but how much your folks in your chat are just thinking. And I really want to reiterate, John, that these questions that folks are asking are not, in my opinion, rooted in conspiracy theories.
Right.
It's rooted in critical thinking and in asking, profound and important questions about this case, shining a light on this case, and then saying, from this case, what can we learn about prevention? And the fact is, we don't know a lot about what happened at this party. We don't know. And yeah.
Definitely. And, I want to thank the chat for really digging in and diving with us on a lot of the information that we've covered in the medical examiner's report. As you can see, this is not about conspiracy. It's looking at what was given to us. It's reading it to understand it. And that's why, I decided to have Dr. Latina to join us to understand the medical terminology in the autopsies and toxicology report. Once again, I had a hard time just trying to get through some of the long, $25 words that we don't know. We don't normally see these words on an everyday basis, and they're in medical terminology. And I'm just so glad that you're here to, help us to get through the educational portion so that we can become more and more aware of this carfentanil, naloxone, this epidemic of opioids that has taken over this country, in a huge storm, and every year, or almost like every 6 months, there's always something new hitting the market out there that's affecting our young people.
And even our older people.
And older people too, yeah. Especially with this carfentanil, if someone, is around someone who has exposed themselves to carfentanil, it's gotten to a point where, if they're close enough, that carfentanil could be made airborne and affect the person that's standing next to them or in line or whatever have you. And that's just lethally dangerous.
Yep. And Hazelnut asked the question, what if somebody asphyxiated or stopped breathing or
I saw that question too
prior to going into the water? And then that's what we sort of say, you die and then you're dumped, so to speak. Well, one of the things that you may or may not see, and again, if you kind of look at the handout that I have I didn't do a handout, but I made a handout for John. And then on I think it was like part 2 or 3 of my little mini series that I did on my little channel, I talk about the findings, the constellation of findings, markers that we see in drowning. One of which is on histology. If you look at the alveoli, and I think that's number, blah, 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 I don't even know where it is on here. Hold on. Don't know where it is. I can't read that quickly. But the alveoli, which are the small little air pocket buds at the end of the tracheobronchial tree on both sides of the lungs, if under microscope you can get slices and look, you would see maybe, but maybe not. But if somebody has actually breathed, so they are alive and they go under the water, you'll see that the alveoli will have opened up, so they'll be expanded. And sometimes you'll maybe even see particulate, silt, dirt, whatever, down deeper into the alveoli. But it requires you to do histologic or microscopic evaluation of the tissues at the very distal or distant portion of the bronchial tree. If they're not open and they're closed like this, rather than being inflated, but they're closed, then that would point more towards the person never took a gasping air once they were in the water. They were already deceased. Again, we don't have that information because that has not been documented as having been done, like a microscopic evaluation under microscope of the alveoli on this particular autopsy. So we don't know.
We don't know, right? If they homogenize their samples, but one comes back as inconclusive, how are others believable? Excellent question.
Right.
In terms of the
tox.
Right. Okay.
Right. Then the question begs, at what point do you, as an observer or a reader or a listener of information, do you place value on the credibility of what's been reported? And that's really what you're talking about. How are these people, the variety of people in this case, are they credible to you? And, as I've said on my own little channel, I believe everybody deserves agency being your voice.
Your voice. Right.
You believe that something is not credible, and you can back that up with, well, there wasn't this done, this wasn't documented, this might have been whited out, the date of birth wasn't present on the tox screen, whatever it is, and you want to express that you don't have faith or you don't find credible X person, Y person, including a content creator. It could be me you don't find credible. That's okay. We have the right to agency and we have the right to express our opinions, in my estimation, as long as we do so, civilly, kindly.
Yes.
Without name calling.
That's right. Or bashing. Or
bashing.
All that other entertaining stuff that they
do. But I think that, as John and I were talking about, for me, what makes me believe somebody or not, or let's say in this case, law enforcement. And I told John earlier this evening before coming on that if I compare the Delphi case and even the Delphi presser that was recently done by law enforcement to the Fantasma or the ghost presser that was done on the first by Truckee or by Placer and Nevada counties, either or, but even their other pressers, the difference for me as an observer, an outsider, is in the Delphi case, there was a lot of information I wished I could have received from their pressers that I didn't get. But it was delivered to me as an outsider with great earnestness, with great honor, integrity in their way of presenting it, in their way of saying, we know we're not giving you this information, and this and this and this have been sealed because we're covering these and sealing these to protect the integrity of the investigation. But what we can tell you is this, this, and this. And then they went on to say, we're going to leave no stone unturned. And as soon as we can get this to a court, or as soon as we are able to present information, we will. Right there, that gave me confidence. But then if you look at the way this law enforcement came to the table for the pressers in the Kiely case, to me, it was not done with earnestness. It was done with nervousness. It was done with like eyes going here and there, with fumbling over their words, or with silence and running away. In other words, we were told a month ago that on November 1st, we would have an update. I personally, now I could be wrong, but I don't think I ever heard from them. We have decided we're going to cancel this, and why we're going to cancel it.
Right.
So that has led, in my opinion, to the public's lack of faith in that particular group of law enforcement agencies in this particular case. And that doesn't mean that I or other folks don't back the blue. I very much back the blue. But you can back the blue and you can be critical. It's not.
I mean, they're public servants. They're public servants.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Lastly, I wanted, I was just reminded by just a couple of words in the chat in regards to HIPAA and the privacy.
Oh, yes. Great. Sorry. I know I was blabbering on and on. Go ahead.
Tell us a little bit about this in reference to one's medical information, how it's protected, and why this this law exists for not only corporations, companies, and things, but for everyone.
Right. So just as a backdrop, when I was first training, and really up until the 1990s, I believe, there was no such national law called the HIPAA, HIPAA, privacy law. It was, the way we were trained was like nurses, like pastors, like therapists, is that it is important to maintain a patient's client's confidentiality. And this is paramount in order to maintain. In medicine, the first day we learned, that the doctor-patient relationship is sacred, that it's unique, it's special, it's sacred. And in order to maintain that, we need to be very careful about sharing information that would identify. I'll give myself an example. Let's say I'm talking about Amy. Oh, Amy, yes, she came into somebody's office and she had this problem and that problem. No, we were just told you can't discuss a name and an associated reason or diagnosis, so that you can't link a person and their private information. And that was the way it was. And it was sort of an informal understanding in the medical and the psychological and the religious communities until the 1990s, when HIPAA, the Healthcare Portability Act, was formalized in a written document. It's very long, but the bottom line is that it is a formalized document that includes not only healthcare and providers and psychologists, psychiatrists, but it also includes medical insurance companies, a doctor's office, your front desk personnel, everybody that may have access to a patient's information. That it is important, number one, to keep that confidentiality. And they really explain that in very granular way in this document. The other thing that is really important is that your healthcare record belongs to you. And so in such, you have the right to your healthcare information. No longer could a physician or a medical provider, whomever, hold back information for whatever reason, including that you owe a bill. Back in the day, if you owed $5, they would say, I'm not giving you your medical documents or your progress notes until you pay on up. No, you can't do that. The HIPAA law prevents that, which I think is very important, because what happens if you don't have that $5 or whatever amount to give? You still have the right, and it's very important that you are able to have that portability, that you can take your healthcare information and take it to another doctor or specialist office or whatever, and that offices, if you sign a waiver saying I give you the right to send my information to whomever, even a lawyer's office, that information is able to be carried over, or it's portable to other agencies, etc., because that will help with the clarity of communication. So other people know this person has a seizure disorder, this person, whatever. So it is very important to know that individuals are covered by the HIPAA privacy laws. But I do think that one misunderstanding that I've seen in the chats on different channels is that people assume that once a person is deceased, they are no longer protected by HIPAA law. And that is simply untrue. And I don't know if in this piece that I sent to you, it talks about the fact that HIPAA, your HIPAA protection, your privacy is protected for 50 years after your death. So let's say in the case of Kiely, you can't just call the lab or call this place or that place and say, hey, listen, this person's deceased, and so there's no HIPAA, so I really would like to have the information. You can't do it. It's protected.
Right.
And that brings me to the other thing at the bottom of this talk screen on particularly Kiely. It says, if you have any questions, feel free to call the lab. I urge you strongly, don't call any labs about any patients, deceased or otherwise. It will only serve to overload the labs, etc. And they will not, and they never should give you, as a non-signed confidant for that particular individual, they should never give you any information about
Right.
them.
Yeah, and according to the HIPAA here at hhs.gov.
Oh yes, that's the Health and Human Services, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services at hhs.gov. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can bring that up on your computer and look it up, and you'll see exactly how it's written out in regards to protecting, your medical information, what it consists of, who is covered, et cetera, et cetera. So we wanted to just share this information with you because it is important that, especially, surrounding the Kiely Rodni case, that, I heard this from this, and I was able to get information from this, and it pertains to personal, private information, then you you have to pause here and kind of ask yourself, well, how'd you get the information? Oh, I call them up directly or something. Well, HIPAA prevents that.
Now, it does, but I will tell you, I'm suddenly had a memory, and that is that during, I don't know if you at all encountered this, John, during the Summer Wells, at the height of the Summer Wells case, I remember in a chat, and I was stunned. I mean, frankly, completely stunned that somebody who lived in Tennessee, who was a healthcare worker, stated openly in the chat that she had gone into the Tennessee vaccination record system, which every state has a vaccination record. Anybody that's been vaccinated under the age of 18, it should be in there, right? That she'd gone in and she actually was able to get information on the vaccination status of Summer Wells. I was horrified.
Oh.
Because that right there, that person should, I mean, that's wrong. That's illegal. That's a fireable offense. And then there were other individuals, I believe from CPS. There was some sort of a leak by somebody in the Summer Wells case. That's a mouthful. Summer Wells case that leaked information, albeit anonymously, about the CPS case status.
Right.
These things are by law protected, and people who dare, to reveal and then announce that they have actually essentially stolen private information unlawfully should just simply, like, to me, if somebody did that in my chat, I would have said you're no longer welcome, because I can't have people that are breaching, HIPAA law.
Right. One last question that we're going to cover on tonight's live. It was a question by Marissa Anderson. Thank you for joining us. Doesn't HIPAA only apply to medical professionals? In other words, a layperson can disclose that same information? I think
No, I don't know exactly what you mean by a layperson, but I'm gonna give you an example. Like in the healthcare arena where I've worked for 30 years now, yeah. Every person that's hired, and then when I had my own practice, every person that was hired had to read the HIPAA law, and they had to sign that they understood the HIPAA law and that they were not allowed, even if they had access, and even if they were the fax administrator, the secretary, anybody that worked for me or worked in the arena where I was working as an employee up until recently. It's not just a medical professional. It's any person, our social workers, our psychologists, our dental technicians, every single hire at the organization where I worked, everybody had to sign HIPAA. And if there was a HIPAA violation, that person was summarily fired.
Wow.
I don't know if that answers Marissa's question. If you mean a layperson, like if the mother of the person wanted to discuss their daughters, well, that's different. I mean, that might be ethically or morally wrong for a mother. I'm making this up without the permission of let's say a daughter who's 30 years old, and suddenly they're, and somebody asked about the legal piece. Well, there are certain legal pieces. For instance, now Kiely's autopsy has been released, right?
Yes.
And all of this, but it was part of a legal process. And I think in the state of California, because she was a minor child, I believe the parents had the right to hold certain things back, but I really am not sure. That's what I'm going to say right now. Wow. But I can for sure tell you, even if in a legal process, HIPAA protected information is released by legal authorities, that is done in a manner that is done legally and lawfully. It does not therefore give us as the public the right to that information, or the right to call different labs or whatever and try to obtain, HIPAA protected information. I just really wanted to be clear on that. And if indeed, and it does happen, like I just gave the example of the Summerwells case, if indeed somebody's coming forward or somebody answers the phone and says, "Oh yes, this is what," that person needs to be reported, because they have had a HIPAA violation.
HIPAA violation.
So if somebody calls a lab, I'm just kidding, and they say, "I want information on," I know a lot of people a few weeks ago when this autopsy came out said, "I'm going to call the lab. I'm going to call the lab, and they're going to give me the information." Well, don't call the lab. Shame on you for calling. Do not call the lab.
Yes, don't bother those people.
Don't do that. Don't bother those poor people. But if indeed you do come across somebody and they do from the lab say, "I got the information," don't take the information. Get the person's name and report it to their superiors. This person was about to give me HIPAA protected information.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you want your information protected?
Absolutely.
Right to that be,
absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Wow. How time flies. We are 2 hours into the live, and we are getting ready to close it down, because I did promise the doctor a specific time like we did Sunday, and we have met that timeline. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. Dr. Latina, thank you so much for your time and helping us to get through this information pertaining to the medical examiner's report regarding Kiely Rodni, a 16-year-old that lost her life in Prosser Lake on August 6th of this year. And the story continues. We're awaiting CHP's report, the forensics, to come back from Quantico in regard to the automobile. And also, the sheriff's department has got a final report. Will
Oh,
they hold a presser?
I
We
did
don't
want.
know.
Oops. Well, I'm sorry, I interrupt. There's a
Oh,
little.
that's okay.
I wanted to say something about Blonde PT has a very good point that this could be a quote redacted autopsy version for public's eye only, and that is possible. But this is my back at you. Not that we're sparring, but my back at you would be with all the public feeling of lack of faith in the law enforcement process in this particular case. It would be, in my opinion, foolish of them or foolhardy to present a redacted version that contained zero points in the physical findings, whether gross, autopsy, microscopic, there was no virtual, zero findings consistent with drowning. Wouldn't it have behooved them, if they were just going to give us a redacted version, to include, to reassure us as the public that they did their due diligence and that the diagnosis of exclusion in this, i.e. drowning, was indeed reasonable?
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you, Miss Blonde PT. I know you from my channel. But yes, I do agree with you. We may not have all the documents. And indeed, another well-known creator asked me kind of to hold my tongue, rein in your opinions. I'm not going to rein them in because I have the right to my opinion. If I do so civilly and with as much evidence-informed data that I can. Oh, that person said, oh, this could be just a redacted and you don't know. No, I don't. But what I do know is that in order to show public a measure of credibility and in order for us to have faith in this process, we must have enough information to show that a cause of death is reasonable.
Is reasonable.
Right?
Absolutely.
I don't know.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with that. I could not agree with that anymore. Definitely. And so,
but I don't want Blonde PT. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I know I'm like sermonizing here, but I don't want Blonde PT to feel that I'm disparaging her question. I do not at all disparage it. And I do believe like we talked last time, I think addendum number 14 has been held back, right, John, on this report. There are certain addenda that have been held back from the public. Yes, we understand that. But what they present to us must be presented in a cogent, comprehensive to the point of what they're presenting and transparent way, which doesn't cause more lack of confidence, more questions on our part. That's it.
Excellent.
I'll hush my sermon.
Excellent, Doctor. Excellent. Well said. And so that's going to wrap up tonight's special table talk with Doctora Latina. Mm-hmm. And we have covered a lot of great information here. This was all for educational purposes. I'm glad that we're able to continue to expose information pertaining to what we need to be aware of, the carfentanil, how to understand certain medical terminologies that can twist our tongue from time to time. If you're reading an autopsy, toxicology, even something from your doctor's office, the invoice or the bill that they send you, and they said that they gave you this prescription, and this prescription is in that medical terminology, that $25 word that you can't read, and so on and so forth, would only bring awareness to say, let's look it up. Let's get down to the fine-tuned facts, for your own health and well-being, as much as it is for everyone else in the family. And so thank you so much, Doctora Latina, for joining us, and for part 2, wrapping up the medical examiners. We'll definitely have you back. And most certainly we'll definitely have you back. And for those that enjoy listening to Dr. Latina this evening, she does have a YouTube channel, and we did post it. It will be posted in the description box if you'd like to subscribe, hit the bell, stay up to the latest that she's doing on her channel. And much love to everyone in the chat. And we certainly appreciate you and your time this evening and covering this important detail.
Well, it is an important detail, John, and I can't tell you how much I feel honored and privileged to be able to come back on your live. And I think you and I have known one another. It's got to be almost 18 months now.
It's got to be, yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
It just collaborating with you is extremely meaningful because I think that you strive, as do I, to try to bring, really important content to the true crime community and really honor and acknowledge that so many folk are lifelong learners and are in earnest when they're trying to understand these problems in life.
Right. Definitely. Well, with that, I will say good night to you, Dr. Latina. I'm going to wrap it up. And we will stay in contact, most certainly, and definitely set up another date to have you back.
Lovely. Okay, family, chat family. Hope to see you soon.
How do you say that in what is it, Spanish? Buenas noches. Or...
buenas noches, amigos. Entonces, hasta la próxima vez. Until the next time.
There you go. That's what we need.
Con mucho gusto. And for your invitation. Con mucho gusto.
Con mucho gusto.
Sí. Adiós, entonces, amigos.
Oh, wow. I love the way she says that way again. Oh, sparks. Anyway, that's a wrap for tonight's Table Talk. And I appreciate all of you who've come out tonight to join us for a special with Dr. Latina. And thank you for sticking in part 1 and part 2. Cover both parts because we do go over a lot of information pertaining to the medical examiner's report. Will this be it in our coverage on this? No. Because as soon as viable information comes out that I find that would be necessary as a complement to the lives that we've done covering the case, I will be bringing it back to your attention so that we could cover it live. Miss Justice says, "Oh, muchas gracias." Okay, but yes, we truly appreciate Dr. Latina for coming in this evening and having a wonderful conversation, one of education and information to inform the general audience, the general public of, various different things we have to stay on top of. We live in the 21st century and things are like every day something new comes abroad and it's like, what is that now? And it can sometimes weigh us down, especially if we don't know. So hopefully the content that I provide on my channel is worth your time. I always say that for every live that I do, I get on here to try and deliver the very best that I can. And I'm constantly learning. I'm not sitting up here saying I know it all, because I don't. But to have folks like Dr. Latina on the panel to help educate me as well as you is a compliment in and of itself. And so with that said, yes, please, thank you, Carol. Hit the like button, show your attendance tonight. We'll continue to follow the story as it unfolds and bring it to you when everything is together, because I don't try to piecemeal things. I try to get to a big chunk and say, yeah, this is content I would like to deliver, and then go live. Thank you all for your love and support. We'll see you next time on another edition of Table Talk. Much love to you, and as I always say, and as I've always said, be well and stay blessed with Godspeed. Until next time, take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to John Hughes Table Talk. Let's go. Here at Table Talk, everybody's opinions matter, because we only here for one reason, and that's the truth. Cue the truth. So many cases we've been facing, so many kids that have been taken. You got yours and you got on. Some more wells I just can't take it. We never see John hesitate. A hard to go you can't replace. So Table Talk gon' be the place where we break down all the basics. You don't need no reservation, open mind, a little face. That's why we work another case. Kids go missing every day. We know the news, they do their thing, but John gon' come through in the pain. But this is a show for all of us, so let us know just what you think. For Table Talk, it's time to go to work. Let the people know that John is going live. It's time for Table Talk. It's time for Table Talk. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you Mr. John Q. Y'all show him some love, man.
Let's go to work tonight.